I would like to share with you my personal, very personal journey with both reincarnation and Christianity. We'll focus on the journey with reincarnation. And the first memory which comes to me there, when I think back, how was that with me at reincarnation? Then what comes to my mind is something which must be a very early memory. I can't be sure how old I was, but I must have been quite young. A little girl. And you know these situations when you look at family photos. Maybe you remember when you were little and you looked at family photos and then you sort of see one where you were a baby. And then you see photos where you aren't anywhere to be seen. And my memory is that I would ask, where am I? As children do. I also remember later that my son asking, where am I on this photo? And I remember clearly asking, where am I there? And being told, oh, you didn't exist yet. And then I remember how everything in me, little child that I was, thought, of course I existed. I cannot remember whether I said it. That I cannot remember, but I remember clearly the hurt and the pain. How can they tell me I did not exist? I did. I'm not here, but I existed. And the fact that I wasn't here doesn't mean that I didn't exist. And I only remembered that many, many, many years later, when I had come to those thoughts, that may actually indeed be so, that the soul is on a journey and exists before it takes on that body of that little child. So when my son asked me, Mommy, where am I there? I never ever would have said you didn't exist. Because I would have thought it's a lie. I would have thought I'm lying if I say you didn't exist. I said to him, well, you weren't here yet. And he said, okay. That's how it is. I wasn't here yet, I hadn't arrived yet. And I think, thinking back to that little girl I was and that pain I felt, of course my parents or whoever that was who said to me, you didn't exist, they didn't want to hurt me. They answered to the best of their knowledge and ability. But I think we do little children a real injustice when we think it's just that little body we see, and that little body wasn't there yet, didn't exist. That's true enough. But that human being who inhabits that body, that did. And I think that pain came from knowing that full well. And knowing that also because I had only just arrived from wherever I was before. So that is the first memory that comes. And of course I was a little girl, so I did not think of reincarnation at all. And despite having had that experience so strongly, I think I had forgotten about that experience when I was in my mid-20s and a young mother myself. And maybe I should say here something about my journey with Christianity too. I had been born into a Lutheran family, baptized and confirmed in the Lutheran church. I loved going to church as a child. I loved praying in given words, but mainly I loved talking to God all the time, like to a friend, and trying to make deals with him, which usually didn't work so well. And then, due to several things happening in my life, mainly the very early and untimely death of my father, maybe timely for him, but not for his two children. I was just 15 when he died of cancer, and that made me turn away from God, made me very angry with God, and I decided that this being can't be trusted, that God whom I believed all my early life, that he was a good and just and loving God, if he could allow that, if he could take my dad away from me, no, I didn't want anything to do with him anymore, turned my back. So when I was in my mid-20s and a young mother myself, I was in a phase of my life where I thought I was trying very hard to be an atheist. Definitely an agnostic. And a friend of mine at that time mentioned reincarnation to me. Sort of offhand said, yeah, I believe in reincarnation, and I think that's the only thing that makes sense. And it really shocked me. I remember that very clearly too. And I also remember why it shocked me. I thought of my baby sleeping next door, and I turned to him and I said, are you telling me my child is someone else? that thought that my little child, despite my experience I had been, I don't know who, in several lives. I was sort of both a bit offended, I think, and really shocked. It almost scared me. Yeah, I think it did scare me. But despite that, the fact that that friend whom I knew and trusted, and I knew him to be no fool, and sort of, he was very down to earth, that he would say something like that, it did awaken something in me, and what it awakened was a question. Could that be? Is that possible? And it put me on a journey, which I suppose you could say I'm still on. And when Tom mentioned New Age, that was sort of my first port of call. Sort of reading books by Shirley MacLaine and lots of others, what they had to say about reincarnation, and there were good bits and there were weird bits. But I think it happened actually quite quickly and quite naturally. But I also came to a place where I thought, I think this is indeed the only thing that makes sense. Because when I looked around me in nature and just saw that nothing that is created, and interestingly I had concepts like that being created, which again in brackets began to show me that I never succeeded in becoming an atheist. I know now full well that I didn't succeed, because I know now that I was angry with God. I was actually having a mighty row with him and telling him, I don't trust you anymore. And if you are very angry with someone and having a row with someone, you very much believe that he exists. So you are not an atheist. And I always want to ask people, I forget his name even at the moment, very famous Dawkins. When they are so angry, I always want to ask them, what did God do to you? That you are having such a mighty row with him. Yeah, because that's how it was with me, when I thought I was an atheist. Anyway, but I had concepts like, I look at these things which are, and which somehow were created, came into being. Plants, simple plants, grass, and it doesn't just disappear, and that was it. It was created for a day, and that was it. Just for fun, or for what? It comes back, and it comes back again, and then it may come back in a different form, and it may evolve. And then I thought, and I was beginning a nurse's training, I was in a nurse's training at the time, and I loved the physiology classes and anatomy, and learning about the utter beauty and wisdom of the human body, which is mind-boggling. It's a miracle and awe-inspiring beauty and wisdom, one after the other. And I thought, and do I really believe that all this exists so that I live for, well, if I'm lucky, 90 years, but there are others who live for one day, for an hour, for a minute, for nothing, and then it disappears, and that was it. Sorry, that was the one chance you got, this 1 minute. All these injustices, if you think about it in sense of fairness, so it made no sense. It made no sense that it should be that one lifetime, and that is it. So once I had overcome that initial shock, I found it actually quite, well, not only not scary, but the only thing which made sense to me. Yeah, and then was the question, I began that journey. Also illness helped to believe again, to believe that there was indeed a creator, and there was a being which I even learned to call God eventually again. And then I thought, but now I believe in reincarnation. So do I have to be a Buddhist now? Because it seems to be, if you believe in reincarnation, the only other ones who do that are sort of the Hindus and the Buddhists and maybe some other, but definitely not Christians. So I thought, well, okay, let's have a look. And someone recommended, I think, was the Tibetan Book of Death or Dying to me. And I got that from the library, and I didn't get very far, a few pages, and then I realized this is not my world. It's not my kind of language. It's not my culture. And then I thought about it, and thought, well, if I do really take this seriously, that I am the human soul, spirit, an entity, which has lived before, has now incarnated again, that might mean that I may even have had something to do with the question where I incarnate. Thinkable, isn't it? I may have had some kind of choice, or it may have something to do with me, at the very least, where I incarnate. If that is true, that I was a soul coming again, it must have a meaning that I incarnated where I did, and that wasn't Tibet. And it wasn't any other Buddhist country. So then I thought if I wanted to be a Buddhist, I probably would have incarnated somewhere where Buddhism is lived. So perhaps the fact that I've incarnated in a Christian country and culture means that it's got something to give me, and it's got something to tell me, and I've got something to do with it. So, as I didn't know any other way church to turn to, I first went back to where I had been baptized in, and went to the Lutheran church and spoke to the Lutheran minister in the city where I lived at the time in Germany, and I said, look, I would like to rejoin. I told him about my story, with my anger and row with God and all of that. And then I said, but you must know, I do believe in reincarnation, and I feel I can't just sort of join the Lutheran church and not tell you that I'm sort of a closet believer in reincarnation. I want you to know. And he wasn't shocked. He looked at me and he said, you know, I must tell you, I know that you share this belief with many of my colleagues, not with me, I must say. I don't share that belief, but I know that many of my colleagues do. But we can't do it officially. It's not part of sort of our official. He didn't say policy, but something. Teaching, thank you. So I rejoined the Lutheran church for a while, until I then came across Anthroposophy. Met Anthroposophy again through illness, through being in a hospital where anthroposophical medicine was practiced. And being a nurse at the time, I was just so taken by this very, very different kind of hospital, where the doctor would ask me in the morning what I've dreamt in the night, and would tell me that it might be a good idea if I was wearing woolen socks, and I was there because of my tummy. And he had time. He took time and sat there with me and really listened. And I thought, what is that? What idea is behind this? What makes such a hospital possible? So anyway, through that journey, I met Anthroposophy because I wanted to know what's behind this hospital, what drives these people. And I read, and I started to read, and it was a journey of 7 years until I really sort of took this on and committed to it. But I found things there in the writings of Rudolf Steiner, where he explained just that we human beings, in a way we combine two different streams in us. We have a bloodstream, we have a body that is inherited from our family. And that makes us part of that family, of that culture we are born into. And we are very, very connected there. And we owe things also. And then there is a different stream, and that's a spiritual stream. That's our soul spirit, which incarnates, this time in that body, family, culture, language, and so on, at different times, in a different body, family, culture, and so on. And there were many such moments when I began to live studying Anthroposophy, well, I actually was moved to tears because I felt there is an answer, not an ultimate sort of box kind of answer, but a kind of explanation to a riddle I've been living with and suffering from. As that one was that I often felt like a bit of a stranger in my family, although I dearly, dearly loved them and they dearly loved me. But I had interests and questions which were not shared by anyone in my family and which made me feel like the odd one out. And then reading and hearing and thinking something like this, I'm deeply connected to my family on that blood level, on that inherited level. But then I'm also just me, who was a me and a self in different contexts. And now I find myself here and I get to know these people and I love them and I owe my life to them on one level. But there's another level of me which is different. So that was something which just felt so liberating in a way and so comforting and helped me make more sense of and deepened my belief in reincarnation. I committed myself to the Christian community to the point that I became a priest in the Christian community, not because of the belief in reincarnation, but because, well, mainly probably, first of all, the sacrament, which I experienced and which touched me in a very, very deep, deep way, just hadn't to do with my thinking for a start. It just touched me really in my heart and almost physically. And I knew I don't want that out of my life anymore. I just want that to be part of my life, always. And it took a while. It didn't happen the first time I attended that beautiful service. It took a while. But when it happened, then it was clear. And when I got to know more about the Christian community and how it works and what it does, what kind of people are there, it was the freedom more than anything, I think. This freedom that I am allowed and share that belief openly with most of the people I have met in the Christian community, that belief in reincarnation. But equally, I could be there and could have the same response to that sacrament, not believing in reincarnation and never having even thought about it. And then I might hear it here or there in conversations, but that freedom, which is there not only for the belief in reincarnation, but on a whole, that you are left free when you come there in how much you want to engage or commit or what beliefs you bring with you. That is what made me commit.